We've got Andy calling from Texas, and he wants to talk about free will. Oh, give me 1 second here.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Yes. Erin's on. Thank you for having me on. And I want to talk about free will. And I believe that we do have free will. And I've listened to the show there at the Community of Austin on their atheist shows. And a lot of people there say that they don't believe that they have free will. And I'm kind of not understanding, how an atheist could, that we don't have free will, it just doesn't make sense to me. So do you want me to explain why I think we have free will first, or what?
Sure. Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear what's on your mind about that.
Okay. The way I look at it is let's say I want something for lunch. I want pizza or hamburger. I'm thinking I have a choice. I can have pizza or I can have hamburger. It's my choice. Where if it's just predestined for me to have that, it seems like I'm living with the illusion of free will. And I'm thinking, isn't the time to think that it's like, are you living in the Matrix? Well, the time to believe you're living in the Matrix is when there's evidence that you live in the Matrix. Where's the evidence that we don't have free will?
Okay. This is a tricky one. I started questioning whether free will was a real thing when I started seeing these tests that that somebody was doing. I can't remember on what show it was, but they was basically testing our reflexes, how fast we are making our decision. And they were like, somebody was like strapped into like this brain machine thing, and they were asking this person to make a choice. It was just a simple choice, like left or right or whatever, and the machine was actually lighting up as soon as the brain had made its decision. And like it was like 10 out of 10 times the machine beat the person's hand on the choice. Like it seems like pretty clear that like the processes are happening before we're maybe even cognizant of it. And so I think that idea that like the illusion of free will, that's kind of where I'm at with it too. Like I do think that I am pretty much on board with determinism, but we still have this like first person experience, and we live as though we do have choice. That's kind of where I am at this stage. I'm still willing to like listen to other arguments about like compatibilism, and but it seems pretty clear to me that we can actually test this. I don't know. What do you think, Zod?
Okay.
Or
I've heard the same thing where, yeah. Okay,
Go ahead.
Heard the same test where they hook you up and the computer can tell which choice you'll make before you've made your choice.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a long leap from, the computer can read your brain as you're making a decision, and before I can actually give my decision, the computer, a few microseconds is quicker in determining what I'm going to do. That's a lot different than, let's say we wind the world back to yesterday, and does everything play out exactly the same way? Because free will, if you go down the hard road of you wind the world back to yesterday and it comes out exactly the same no matter how many times you do it, then yeah, we really are living in a predetermined, predestined world where a computer that's hooked up to my brain waves, yeah, it can figure out before I can make the decision, but can it make that decision, let's say, an hour before you ask me? So think of a card, any card at all in the next hour, and you can hook up my brain right now, but, try to figure it out where maybe I'll make my decision a half hour from now which card I'm going to pick. I think the way that they test that thing, it's basically it's testing your decision, and yes, it can figure out what you're going to do quicker than you can, but it's only because my ability to relay the information is slowed by my body.
Okay. I don't know. I think that like it just like it's that I'm gonna get my wording wrong here, but it's like I can't will myself to want something other than I already want. I don't know. Maybe you have a better way of explaining it, Zod, but
Yeah, there are a couple things I would say. It's when I think through it intuitively, it feels like there's something deterministic that is going to lead us to make decisions, just because, at least the way I see things intuitively, there might be science to it that I don't understand. It feels like we are a combination of how our bodies are wound up to act and then our environment. So it does feel to me, at least on some intuitive level, just as a philosophical question, that we don't have free will. But I would say a few things. I don't think you can really totally get to the bottom of it, at least in a way that's useful for how we make decisions. And the way I've heard it put, I think it might have been Christopher Hitchens, but I'm not sure, is that we have no choice but to have free will. And that basically sums up my perspective. We basically need to act as if we have free will. So this question doesn't really inform our behavior in any way. So that's really where I end up landing in the end.
That's where I am too. I mean, I can understand from the science point of view of all we have in the universe is mass and energy. And if you put the universe to the exact state it was yesterday and said, okay, start again, if all there is mass and energy and everything's in the same state it was yesterday, would everything play out the same way? And it might. But then again, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's some type of quantum action going on that maybe that's what allows us to have the free will. But I mean, imagine living in a world where you act as though no one has free will. You never would ask your kid, what do you want for Christmas? You just get whatever you're going to get. If somebody were to kill someone, you would never.
That would totally deny our.
Because
that would be totally like denying our first person experience, then, right? Like I don't think we can get to the bottom of it necessarily either. But we live as though we have choice, because there is still this experience that we're having. We may not be able to prove that they we may not be able to ever conclusively prove that we don't have free will, but the part of our consciousness is the experience of having choice. And I don't it's one of those philosophical questions that I think there are some arguments on both sides that I find interesting, but we can't step back in history and necessarily know whether things would happen exactly again how it is, but we might as well live as though we have choice. Go ahead.
You're thinking the same way I am now. You're doing the same thing I am. I mean, basically, yes, I can understand the science of maybe we don't have free will, but by the same token, we have to live as though we do and everyone else does, because that's the only way our life makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, to go through life and just everything's happening, it happens. I'm just going to go along because why make a choice? Because everything's just going to happen. It's just a ridiculous way to live.
Yeah, so, I mean, it does cause some existential kind of dread when you start thinking about it, but I think that there is some level of compatibility going forward, that you know, within that first person experience, like you are going to make a choice and then you're going to be happy with that, where that choice goes, because you had the experience of making that choice, and granting other people that same experience that they are having in a human experience where they are feeling that idea of choice. So I don't think there's much more we can do about it other than that. And I think that as far as when it comes down to because I know that some of the arguments go to well, then how do we construct our society? And I think then you have to talk about how can you punish somebody if they've made a decision and they don't have free will? But then you still have to function as a society and you have to make sure that people are safe. So even though somebody is a murderer, and we can look in their, we can see them as somebody who has had some part of their fate has been determined because of their upbringing. But the reality of how we actually live is that we need to make sure that they can't harm other people. So we still have to live within that idea, Does that make sense to you?
I agree completely. That does make sense. But why wouldn't the normal position be then that we have free will until we can prove that there isn't free will? Why wouldn't that be the default state of it appears we have it until someone can say that definitively that we don't?
What do you mean by the default state? I don't think that is something that is I don't think there's a default state for almost anything. I think that people argue about it all the time.
Yeah, but the thing is, everyone I've ever met acts as though they have free will and everyone else does. They ask, hey, what do you want for lunch? Hey, what do you want for Christmas? You know, why do you like this person, that person? What do you I mean? They ask as though we have free will to choose. You want to be a Democrat or Republican? We ask it, you know, as though everyone has a choice. Since everyone I've ever met acts that way, shouldn't everyone by default say, I think we have free will, but we may not have it, and here's some reasons why we may not have it, but we can't definitively prove that that's true.
I think it is the default as far as how we view the world in terms of how we should act. Like, basically what you're saying to me serves as having free will being at least the functional default of how we see things. I think beyond that, it's just philosophical questions. And I think starting conversation with the assumption or maybe the major possibility that we don't have free will for some reason helps us think through how decisions are made or how things work. But functionally, yeah, we all behave as if we have free will, and I think we're going to, which is why I'm not terribly interested in delving too far into the bottom of this question or getting too hung up on it, because like you said, it doesn't impact the way we live. The only big exception I would take is when people try to say that God's existence makes free will more possible or something like that. When it starts becoming used as an apologetic, then I'm going to have a bit of an issue with it.
And I can understand where someone basically definitively says that we have free will for a fact. Well, we can't prove that we have free will. We can't prove it one way or the other. I mean, it appears that we do, but unless we could like rewind the world back to yesterday and run it over again, do something different, that would prove we have free will. But since we can't do that, I don't know how you would ever prove definitively that we do have it or not.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with you, Zod, that like there's only so much that we can like we're maybe not get into the bottom of it, but I think it's important that we aren't using the idea of our free will experience to cause harm and abuse to other people, because I think that's one of the most common ways that it is used. That like, you know, being certain ways is a choice, and like it gets loosely used to blame people for a lot of different things. So I don't know. I'm gonna let you go now, Andy, but thank you so much for calling in. I don't know. We're just gonna keep living like we have the illusion of free will, even though it seems like maybe we don't.